heavens declare the glory of God. Hit record.
Okay.
Hopefully I'm in view.
Yeah, you're good.
Is that good?
Yeah,
Should I move over?
a little bit that way. Yeah, that's good enough.
Okay.
It must be pretty wide frame.
Yeah, well, it is ultra wide actually. It's full frame too. So
Oh, that's nice.
yes, it looks like a movie actually.
That's really cool.
So I try to make it a little bit artistic just to add some flair.
Mhm.
I'm actually a professional videographer.
Oh, wow.
So
Here in Monroe.
not technically. So I work for a company that sets up events and weddings for me. They're called Complete Wedding and Events. They're actually all over the States. So they're pretty big.
So you do video, like wedding videos and stuff?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
So I kind of started that last year, but so your name was
Ami.
Ami.
A-M-I.
Okay. Am-I. Again, my name is Samuel. So first of all, I just want to ask you, what do you think the purpose of life is?
That's like a really big question
Oh,
for a
yes.
Tuesday afternoon.
Well, let me narrow it down a bit,
Okay.
just to make it a little bit easier and also for the viewers. But in philosophy, there are three big questions that come with that for the purpose of life. It's where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? Okay. So if you
Okay.
could just answer those, you have the purpose of life.
Wow. But people have been trying to do that for thousands of years, haven't they?
Well, that is why religion exists, actually.
That is why religion exists. So I guess I should disclose I'm not really religious. So I feel like lately this changes a lot, and I imagine it'll change over the rest of my life. But lately I've just been feeling like there's a big hive mind situation going on, you know, and people seem to be so much happier and so much more fulfilled when there's a lot of connection with other people. And I feel like we come from that. We come from these ancestors and traditions and places and even like the earth, and then here we are, and there's so many other animals and even the trees and everything like that. Like, it is very connected. So I do feel like that is part of where we come from.
Okay.
Not sure what we're supposed to be doing. I'm still working on that. But
Sure.
I was raised kind of Buddhist, so there's very much like
Interesting.
a lot about being very chill and detached and not attached to outcomes, and like okay with suffering as just part of life.
Is that from your Korean lineage?
You know, actually it's not. It's just something my parents got into
Okay.
when I was little, I guess.
So do you know the writings of Buddha at all?
I haven't read them since I was like 6. So I knew some.
I don't know too much, so I only know a little bit. I know a lot more about more theistic religions, but yeah, I'm not very
Interesting.
very well informed about pantheistic or even polytheistic
There's a lot
religions.
out there.
Yes, there is quite a bit.
So I imagine we're all trying to do the same thing, which you said earlier. That's the point of why we have religion.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the idea of religion is seeking the divine, and if you can find the divine, you can essentially understand why you exist, because you're seeking the creator.
Do you believe that?
So, well, I think that there is a creator, but I would say it's more scientific. So in the sense with that, I think there is evidence from the world that we see around us, so the world that we can examine now, not just forensic, but empirical science. In fact, I'm kind of a big proponent of the Big Bang, and I believe that if the Big Bang, at least any conclusion surrounding the Big Bang has theistic implications. So,
Didn't they just disprove the Big Bang, though? Like, just a few weeks ago, I was reading some new...
yeah,
they are
a lot
always
of
doing
people
that,
have said
right?
that. Well, the thing
Over the
is that
years.
first of all, certain amount of scientists don't like it.
Okay, fair.
Because it has theistic implications. In fact, when it first came out, actually a lot of people were not only becoming convinced, like atheists were coming out and saying like, now there's reason to believe that there's actually a God, like there's empirical science here, and a lot of Christians were essentially, or even just theists in general, were just like, now they have evidence, haha, not exactly, but
Yeah, but now we have proof that other people will believe.
sure, yeah. I mean, it's just like, you know, it when you're confirmation biased,
You're right.
it's always, it's 4:00, so we
that's
gotta
okay.
hurry.
We got a couple It's fine. Whatever works for you. I'm
Just
pretty
give me
chill.
a second. I never shut this off, and it's been like 3 interviews actually, and I have to shut it off in the interview.
No worries.
Okay, so but to move forward to
Yes.
actually, because I want to come to a conclusion here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I believe that God exists, and so have you heard of the Kalam cosmological argument?
I don't think so.
Okay, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore it has a cause. That cause, according to the basic laws of physics, cannot be less than, but has to be either equal or greater. Now, if time, space, matter, and energy all began at one point, that means that this being or essence cannot be those things. Has to essentially be beyond those things. So that means this is where Aristotle had kind of coined the idea of a first cause, uncaused being. So I actually just read a bit about Antony Flew. He believes in the Aristotelian God. Do you know who Antony Flew is?
No, I don't.
He was the most notorious atheist in the 20th century.
Okay.
And he became a theist because he literally just said evidence. Evidence convinced him. So Fred Hoyle is kind of the same. He kind of was convinced. In fact, I know people who have become not just theists, but even Christians from the idea of the existence of a creator. And so a theist, though, is someone who believes in a personal creator. A deist is someone who kind of holds to like a distant God. So like Einstein actually believed in a distant type of creator.
Okay.
But that argument, the cosmological argument, is just one.
Yes.
There's also the fine-tuning or the teleological argument, and then there is the moral argument. There's also the ontological, but I prefer those first 3.
That's certainly enough to keep you going.
Well, and I think it's actually good evidence. It's not automatically proof because, like, you know, practically anything is philosophically possible.
Right.
But if God does exist, do you think that there is a day in which justice will be done? I realize this is skipping a bit of logic.
That's okay. We can skip logic. Justice. What do you mean by justice, and what do you mean by done?
So, like someone like Hitler. So, someone who had murdered millions of Jews and ended up, we think, killing himself. Do you think that an infinite being who would, at least I believe that logically only an infinite being can only be good, that being good would then punish Hitler
But
properly.
how do we know what good is? And
well,
how
that
do you know
being
it's not a
would be
bigger
the essence of good.
But how do we even, maybe we're grasping a tiny piece of good.
Oh, I agree that maybe that we are, but I would say that logically, in a coherent sense, this infinite being would be the
good.
essence of good.
I am a questioner, Samuel. So I just
No,
have to
I
be
get
like,
that.
I want to believe that too. And then I'm like, okay, but like, what if the concept of good and bad is just like gravity and it exists here, and then in some other plane of existence it doesn't, and then there is no good or bad, or there's an infinite being and it's neither good nor bad, or maybe it's a giant experiment, right? And it's neither good nor bad, and just we keep coming back. We keep recycling through to figure stuff out, and so we have to do shitty things sometimes. Excuse me, but we do. We have to do really bad things sometimes, or we all have to go through this whole hive mind experience. I am not in any way endorsing horrible behavior.
Right.
I'm just wondering if we're having this theoretical
Is it
conversation.
subjective or objective?
Right, about good and bad. But if we're taking that conversation aside, that argument aside, justice being done, and I assume that you mean justice being dished out by some higher being, not justice down here.
No.
Okay.
I mean ultimate final justice.
We don't even know what ultimate or final is either, do we?
Well,
It's infinite.
if God exists, then he would be the essence of that. He would be the essence of ultimate. He would be the essence of final. He would be the beginning and the end.
Okay, that is a good point.
That's also the Greek. In fact, in the Bible, actually, it uses the Greek letters Alpha and Omega to describe God. So it says he is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the ending.
Okay, so I feel like that strengthens my argument, which is that, okay, so imagine, this is the problem I've always had with like singular God religions, and that is like, if a God is good, and why would he let anything happen? And why would all that, and that's a whole other conversation. But if we come from that and we go back to that, who's to say that we just simply can't even fully understand what we're supposed to be doing here? And if we're part of that, because any being who created all of this, we are part of that, right? We're from that, we're going back to that, so therefore we're part of it. He doesn't have to punish some part of him or it or them. Like it's just coming and going. It's this giant circle and everything is this hive mind. So like, it's hard for me to think that we would understand, like, our concept of justice, our concept of what is acceptable or not acceptable, or what justice would be, probably doesn't apply. Like, I've always thought that the ultimate justice for Hitler would be if he had to go back and live every single life of a person he'd affected poorly, but he had to know that it was his fault.
Who would determine that?
Who would determine what?
That he would go back and do that.
I'm just saying, if I got to determine it, it would be something like that. Like, I think about that sometimes. I've had this thought process before.
Sure. And I certainly have too. And I mean, in my perception, that would be correct. But if God exists, he would also have the best perception.
Right,
because
and it
he'd
might
see
be
everything.
Outside of all of what we understand.
Right, he'd be outside of time. He'd be outside of matter and energy
Right,
and space. So he'd see everything and be beyond that and be able to also control it if he wants. So, but if
like,
we
also,
have,
why would he care? Like,
well,
why would he care what
if-
we do? Like, we're very small.
Well, actually, that is a great thing. Well, if he is infinitely good, that means he's also infinite love and mercy and grace and truth and also righteousness and justice. So he would be all attributes of goodness, because evil is a lack of goodness. It's not an opposite.
I feel like it's more active than just a lack of goodness. Like,
Well,
do we revert to evil if we don't do anything?
It's a twisting of goodness.
To what?
So it's a lack thereof of something that we know is right to do. So, like, we know intuitively that rape is wrong.
Right.
We know intuitively that murdering your neighbor
Both
is
of those
wrong.
things are very subjective. And I hate to say that. I'm a survivor, okay? But I do have to say that things get very muddy very fast. And that's one thing. I do not think that, like, being in a position, I have been in a position where I had the power to press charges against somebody who
Sure.
had raped me.
Wow.
And I didn't think that it would be for the greater good to do that, considering all the circumstances, which I don't have to go into right now. But what does that serve? Is that personal justice? Is that personal revenge? What about the suffering of that person? Because clearly something's up with him. And then, like, is he going to go and hurt other people? What is the most likely path for him to go hurt other people if he's hurting even more? If he's hurting even more, it's because I pressed charges and it got terrible. So, like, things get so messy and they balloon outwards. And so to imagine a being who has control over all of those things and then some, I just, again, feel like, not sure it's evil is the lack of goodness, not sure that we can just black and white say something's right or wrong. And I like to think of any larger being, there's no black and white, it's all gray.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, and I'm sorry that you've gone through that. That is
Thank you.
a terrible thing, and I can't relate. Sometimes I wish I could to things like that have happened to people, but I know people who have gone through that, and it can ruin your life.
Mm-hmm.
But something that should also be considered is that if God also is infinite and infinitely good,
Mm-hmm.
if he creates beings with free will and free choice, that means that they could be held accountable in a justice sense.
Why would he do that? Why would he give us free will?
So that we can love him truly, because the only way to have true love
Is free will.
is with free will. But that creates the
But why would-
possibility for
the opposite to happen,
Exactly.
right? Okay, but then why would you do that unless, no offense to anybody here, unless you were very vain? Why would you create a bunch of things and then see if they liked you?
Well, if God exists in the sense that I'm talking about, he'd be an infinite being, so he wouldn't lack anything.
So then why would he have to do what he just did?
Because also, if God exists, he deserves infinite respect, which means that him creating beings that will genuinely love him, even though it may not be all, it's still fulfilling a universal purpose.
We don't know that that's universal, first of all. And second of all,
Well,
I'm not arguing here, but, like, I'm just like, why would a universal being who's just totally chill have to create all these little companions and then, like, make sure that they were okay with him?
In full, I cannot answer that question because
That's
I'm a
okay.
human being.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But-
I'm not asking you. I'm just posing it as part of this
No,
argument.
and I think it's important. I think it's genuinely important. But I also think that if you can at least understand in part, because an infinite being would be impossible for a limited being to understand.
Right. So
So
we wouldn't know why he would do
logically, it's extremely difficult for me to actually comprehend.
Right,
I
maybe
can apprehend, but I
Right.
cannot comprehend. So
Okay.
in that, if I could somehow discover him
Yeah.
through other ways, then I
Okay.
could, if he reveals himself to me,
Yes.
then I will be able to understand him. This is partly what religion is. In fact, this is
Okay.
part of, actually, it's funny because Aristotle in his philosophy disagrees with the Greeks' idea of gods. because he said that there has to be one overarching God above all gods,
Yeah.
a God of gods.
Yeah, but the Greeks had many.
Right, exactly. But they don't think that. The Greeks didn't think that there has to be a God of gods, but Aristotle, Sophocles,
Lots of
and
other
Socrates are the
crusty old
ones.
white guys think that.
They're the ones who said there needs to be a God of gods. There
And do
needs
you-
to be
like-
an infinite being who holds all attributes, so that
Okay.
then he is the source
The
of all
source.
things that we have.
Which, as you said earlier, like it has to come from more. Like it can't. The purpose has to be. I can't remember how you said it, but you were like, everything has to have a purpose, and it has to be greater than or equal to.
Oh
it
yeah,
can't be lesser.
cause and effect, right?
so
it has to
that
be either
matches that.
equal or greater than.
Okay, right.
So-
But so you're saying essentially, and I'm not challenging your belief. I'm just saying this conversation has now turned into: is there what is now the question? Because we have explored many things.
Oh yes, and
Which I
we could
love.
talk for hours.
We could, and I should probably go. Actually, I'm terribly sorry,
Okay.
but I'm very interested in this conversation.
Of course. Well, and I'll give you something before I go. But I want to finish with this.
Yeah.
So first of all, part of the reason I have these conversations is, of course, I want people to think. I want people to consider what I believe and why I believe it. I always try to work with people through my worldview logically. I want them to question me. In fact, it's great that you're doing this because I want to see if I have any holes. And also I want to help you to refine, not just refine, but I talk to people who have hardly any view. And I want them to actually consider what I have to say and see if this genuinely makes sense in the world that you see around you. And even though technically that's more of like, that's not necessarily a box top philosophical view, but it is a proper way to it's actually a scientific way to creating a proper worldview and understanding your purpose in life.
You
So
do have
like,
to think about it.
yeah, exactly. But if you can somehow discover the divine through him revealing himself to you, and you have good reasons to believe that that is in fact from the divine, then you can figure out the purpose of life from there. Or the divine could just directly revelate to you.
I feel like
So-
that's a very simplistic idea of what might happen to poor little humans, personally.
Well, and the thing is that I do believe that the divine has revealed himself to us, but I believe that the Bible is from God, but I believe that there's many reasons, not just philosophical, because actually the God of the Bible reveals himself as a God of gods, a King of kings, a Lord of lords, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the essence of logic,
And
the
why
essence
do
of
you
love.
believe him when he just says this?
No, but the point is that lot in philosophy, I see reason to believe that type of God exists, the Aristotelian
Okay.
God.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
So then I see that in the Bible that Aristotelian God kind of matches the biblical God. Okay.
But how do you know that Aristotle wasn't just like
Well,
rubbish?
because I think his logic follows correct.
Up until there. Okay.
I think it follows. I think it's correct logic.
Okay.
So I don't think all his logic is correct. I think he has some errors, but I think he was onto something. And a lot of philosophers think he was too.
Okay.
And it wasn't just him. It was Socrates, Sophocles, okay? But even further than that, I think there is historical evidence that the Bible is true.
What do you think about the Gnostic Gospels?
The Gnostic Gospels,
Yes.
they don't have the historicity of the
That's not a
mainline
word.
Gospels.
But have you read about them?
I have read about them. I haven't necessarily read them specifically.
Because they're like a conversation. It's really cool. And if
Yes.
anything would convince me more of religious or historical context and truth and usefulness of that, it would be that. Actually,
Interesting.
and how it is a conversation, and it is very human in a way that, of course, it would have to be.
Sure.
But I have found that a lot of people just simply refuse to look at them because they don't
Right.
want to consider the fact that things might not be verbatim true, which wouldn't necessarily lower the impact or the importance of the Bible at all.
Well, some of them do have some very out there ideas.
Yes, well, the Bible has some pretty out there ideas.
Certainly, but I would say in terms of if the Bible is true, they have way out there ideas. So that's what I mean. But
Like, if the Bible is true, then the Gnostic Gospel has some way out there ideas. Is that what you're saying?
yes.
Yeah, and if reality is true, and then what the Bible is saying has some pretty out there ideas. So I'm just saying it's
But
all
if the
from
Bible's
which perspective.
reality,
How
it's
would
not
we
way
know?
out there. Well, you can historically examine the claims of it. So
Right, and that includes the Gnostic Gospels, which
yes,
you should read.
but I think that the Gnostic Gospels aren't historical.
Where did you get that idea?
Well, it partly actually, from scholars Christian scholars.
Right. So those are people who have as we talked about earlier, confirmation bias.
Not necessarily.
Really?
No, because they're not just Christian scholars, and some of them actually came to these conclusions beforehand.
I would be really curious who those people are.
I mean, N.T. Wright, Gary Habermas, J. Warner Wallace. He's not actually a scholar, but I don't know if Josh McDowell really has an opinion on it.
A lot of people don't bother.
And then,
remarkably.
There's another one that I should mention here, but I forgot his name.
It's okay, I'll look him up.
But I would say Gary Habermas and N.T. Wright are also important. I think Bart Ehrman is a good source for pretty much any skeptic. But he's interesting because, and I've listened to him enough to know that when he talks to Christians, he's very skeptical to Christianity. When he talks to atheists, he's very skeptical to atheists. He kind of tries to pull atheists in, but then he tries to pull Christians in. It's like he pretty much wants everyone to just be a skeptic, not atheist or Christian.
Yeah.
So he's interesting like that. So he kind of has more of a middle ground view. But the point is that, and I realize you're running out of time.
I really am.
I was just trying to say that I think that there is good reason to believe that the Bible is true. It all hinges on Jesus Christ rising from the dead. If he rose from the dead, he's trustworthy. He's actually who he said he was, because he claimed he was God, and he claimed that he would rise from the dead. And so that means that everything he says is inherently trustworthy. So
there's a lot of leaping to conclusions there, but I do
sure,
understand.
But I'm
why
just saying that for
case.
the sake of time.
Yes,
and
okay.
also,
I appreciate it.
Here, I wanted to give you a book. So this is not some overarching book where it's just give you all the historical reasons why Christianity is possibly true. And again, it's about evidence. It's not about proof, right?
Okay.
Because there are many different things involved in there, but essentially, you can't historically prove something.
No.
You can't historically prove that George Washington existed.
Right.
You can't historically prove that
yesterday existed, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I was also 5 minutes younger 5 minutes ago.
I know, but were you? Thank you.
So Ray Comfort is, he's actually a Christian evangelist, but he's a great writer.
Okay.
And so that is what it says it is, scientific facts in the Bible.
Okay.
It just gives you some reasons, and even talks about some of the prophecies and about how, and actually we have manuscript evidence that they were written before they were supposedly come true. And so you have reason to believe, okay, the Bible is possibly from a divine source, because only, or at least I would say that only divine character can tell the future.
Although it could tell somebody else.
Exactly, like a prophet.
Right, exactly.
Right, but that's the point. They're prophecies from prophets who say that they got their word from God. So, and it goes over how the Bible actually matches modern science, even though it didn't know about it.
Interesting.
So,
okay, well, I will read that. Thank
you.
Samuel,
thanks again.
Thanks for this conversation.
I appreciate it. I want to go into more. I know you have to get going.
I'm sorry. I do, but I'm going to give that back to you. That was very, very interesting way to spend my afternoon.
Sweet, good.
What's your channel called?
Did you stop it? All right, so this is a bit raw, and so was the last interview. It was so great getting to talk to me, because, I mean, she just brought up questions that, I'm like, thank you. I ask this stuff all the time, and I think there are genuine answers. But, I wonder if, people actually think this stuff. I don't usually ask it out loud. I think sometimes I have before in my interviews. But the thing is that even though I didn't get to go over the gospel or really go over lots of evidence, because there is certainly a lot, I just appreciate the fact that she was willing to bring up those weird questions, as some might say. I mean, first of all, if I come across you, please bring up those weird questions. I really appreciate it. And a lot of times we can get so caught up in having this disagreement, an argument, that we don't actually get anywhere. And in her case, she was even though it kind of led into that way, it was partly my fault, but she actually wanted a conversation. She wanted these interesting questions. She wanted interesting answers. She wanted a flow of logic. We should want this as people. This is why I'm doing this format now, is because it's less about the interview, I want to share the gospel with people, but instead, more or less, I just care about having a conversation. I want people to actually talk to me and talk about what are your opinions. And also, I just realized that this mic isn't working, and I know why, but I know that my shotgun is. So I know you can hear me, but I hope that you appreciated listening to me, and just give me some of your thoughts in the comments. I don't answer comments anymore, but I love the conversation in the comments. I do read them. I just don't comment back. But thank you for your time, and I hope you all have a great day.